Hello, good morning and welcome to Thursday's edition of Politics at Jack and Sam's Daily, as me and Sam and Westminster and everybody in the world tries to come to terms with the reality that Donald Trump has won the US presidential election and won it bigly.
I mean, what a journey. Just 36 hours ago at 2 o'clock in the morning, Tuesday into Wednesday, we were being told by everybody that it was too close to call. But as of now, Donald Trump has beaten Kamala Harris 291 electoral college votes to 226. Jack, that's not close. That is not close at all. I'm Sam Coates of Sky News, and with me is Jack Blanchard of Politico. And now it's clear already this result will change Britain's domestic politics, domestic policy, economic policy, and foreign policy. It's massive.
There's some cheer for Britain last night as Keir Starmer secured one of the first calls with the President-elect Donald Trump. There's this weird sort of diplomacy that goes on about what order people get phone calls with him in. There will be relief for Karen Pierce, Britain's ambassador over in the US, who will have secured this call and whose position, Sam, looks increasingly secure, at least for a short while in that job, given that she's got pretty good relations with the Team Trump, and Britain is now scrambling around trying to find other people who are friends with him to try and cope with the next 4 years of him being in power.
I think that there'll be relief in the ambassador's residence in Washington that Karen Pierce was able to pull off that call. Her tweet yesterday looked almost like a job advert to say, after Keir Starmer congratulated Donald Trump on being re-elected, Karen Pierce posted a picture of herself with Donald Trump. And I think that she was positioning herself to stay, and it looks as if she will, maybe for a year. Let's just talk, first of all, about that call. Keir Starmer was one of at least 3 other European leaders to get calls. Emmanuel Macron was very, very keen to be the first person to congratulate Donald Trump and spoke to him for 25 minutes. Giorgia Meloni was another one from Italy, and Viktor Orban was also taking to social media to talk about his call. We know a bit about what Keir Starmer spoke to Donald Trump about, but mostly it was vague pleasantries. I think the fact that the readout was so vague is slightly a testament to nobody wanting to create any hostage to fortune. It talked about how Keir Starmer was sort of thrilled that Donald Trump had been re-elected. He congratulated him on that and how they look forward to working together. And there was just one specific, and it was noticed, I didn't see any specifics in any other world leader calls, but Keir Starmer chose to bring up the Middle East, where he reminded Donald Trump about the need for regional stability. So sort of there you have it. Keir Starmer using his first, sort of firing his first, or trying to use his first little bit of leverage on the Middle East because of all the fears about the way that Israel is going to interpret a Trump victory and what that could mean and the consequences for wider Middle East stability.
Strikingly missing from the number 10 readout of the call with Donald Trump, although of course these things are not comprehensive, they're just whatever number 10 decides to tell us about that phone call, was any mention of Ukraine, which you would imagine would be pretty high up any British Prime Minister's list of things they want to talk to Donald Trump about. Maybe Keir Starmer decided this was not the moment to bring up the fact that everyone's absolutely terrified in Europe that Donald Trump's going to pull out American support of Ukraine, or maybe they discussed it a bit and it didn't get mentioned. It is more encouraging from that point of view, if you care about the future of Ukraine, that Donald Trump did also find time to call President Zelensky yesterday. And President Zelensky has been all over social media saying how wonderful it is that Donald Trump's here and how he's looking forward to a very positive relationship. He's really trying to love bomb Donald Trump in every possible way, which seems like a sensible approach to me. Whether it'll make a blind bit of difference to what happens to American foreign policy next year remains to be seen. But Zelensky doing what he can to try and get in Donald Trump's good books and try and get him on side and try and convince him that supporting Ukraine, is the big winning American foreign policy move that he needs to make. Trump, of course, is dubious, and there are certainly people around Trump who are more than dubious about that. The other call I would have loved to have listened into, Sam, with Trump's call with Macron, as you say, went on for 25 minutes. I mean, the dynamic between those guys was so entertaining last time. They had this sort of grudging respect, stroke absolute seething hatred for each other. And you remember all the business with the handshakes and so on. I reckon Donald Trump probably spent 25 minutes crowing at Macron about him coming back to power, and goodness knows how Macron's doing with that. Macron, of course, now in a very weakened political position compared to where he was last time Trump was in power. Trump in a much stronger position than he's ever been before. So yeah, the dynamic really shifting with all these leaders now.
And it's going to be interesting to watch because European leaders and this wider Europe, so this includes Keir Starmer, are all gathering today in Hungary, in Budapest, where there is a stock take on the last 48 hours of global politics, for the meeting for what is essentially Emmanuel Macron's group of wider European leaders, the European political community. This was long arranged, but the date was no coincidence, just so that people across the continent of Europe could digest the result of the American presidential election. And that's what they're all going to be doing. The agenda, well, it says it's NATO and Ukraine and security, but obviously there's one thing that is on the agenda more than anything else. So it must be a bit strange if you're sitting in the White House. You have calls from all these European leaders telling you how pleased they are that you're heading back to Pennsylvania Hill. And then you watch them all gather to sort of plot about how they're going to deal with you and put up tariffs against you and essentially try and work around you. And that's the kind of, there is a bit of that dynamic going on. I was speaking to a European ambassador on Tuesday night who said this is the moment where we begin to really work out what our response is going to look like once we've got the result in.
Yeah, Trump, of course, not quite in the White House yet, although it certainly feels like that. It'll be in January. But you're right; they will all be there talking about him all day. You'll have all these side little meetings going off at the football stadium in Hungary, where European leaders are gathering. Where you can imagine sort of Macron and Starmer sitting in a dark room together, just staring at each other and like shaking their heads about what they're going to have to deal with next year and for subsequent years after that. The couple of interesting dynamics about this European community meeting today. One is that German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is going, even though his government collapsed last night, and we're going to have another set of major elections happening now in Germany earlier in the new year, and it looks pretty unlikely that Scholz is going to survive. I mean, he is incredibly unpopular. He's got the full Biden treatment over in Germany, where his centre-left government has just become increasingly unpopular, and no one is really expecting his political future to be rosy, and yet he will still be there talking about all this stuff, although goodness knows how much part he's going to have to play in it. The other really interesting dynamic is that this summit is being hosted, of course, in Hungary by Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister, who is one of the few European leaders who is a massive, genuine Donald Trump fan. You know, he met Putin in Moscow earlier this year. He's not a fan of the war in Ukraine. He's not a fan of Zelensky, and he loves Donald Trump. And so weirdly, you have all these European leaders, as you say, getting together, sort of moping and sobbing about the fact that Donald Trump's coming back and figuring out what they're going to do, while the host of it is walking around with a big smile on his face, feeling completely empowered and beaming about the future of the world. So, yeah, watching Orban's press conference in Budapest this afternoon should be quite a thing, I reckon.
Donald Trump has said that he's going to sort out Ukraine in 24 hours, and that basically puts the whole of the continent of Europe on notice that things could move quite quickly on that front. Meanwhile, I think
we have to say, Sam, just clearly, he's not going to sort out Ukraine in 24 hours. Like, he's not going to do that.
He's not. Of course, he's not. But when you've got that plus the live Middle East conflict, all likely to be, very, very big issues from January the 20th when he returns formally to Pennsylvania Avenue. The fact that Europe is actually deeply divided, I think becomes, actually is a very important issue and sort of comes into play. So you have the traditional power brokers in Europe, so France and Germany. But as you say, Macron has got his own domestic difficulties. You've got the German government collapsing. And given that the elections in Germany are likely to take place in the spring of next year, Germany will not be playing a big role in these discussions. Meanwhile, the people in the ascendancy in Europe are Donald Trump fans. So it's not only Viktor Orban, but you've got Giorgia Meloni, who is very open about her support for Donald Trump and the White House and bits of that agenda. And you can just see the sort of balance of power across the EU and wider Europe shifting because of what's happening in the White House. And it could mean that Giorgia Meloni has really quite a sort of key power breaking role in the months to come, while the main sort of drivers of the EU are distracted with their own affairs. At this meeting in Hungary, basically two things are going to happen. There's a meeting of the 47 wider political leadership across Europe, which Keir Starmer is invited to, but then Keir Starmer is sort of sent away along with other leaders who are not part of the European Union, and then there's a big dinner tonight of just the EU leaders. And one of the questions that seems to be kicking around is Viktor Orban going to try and get Donald Trump up on a video link? He's being heavily discouraged from doing that by the European Union, by the European Commission. But could he leverage his relationship to try a stunt like that, which I think would be deeply kind of inconvenient and awkward, just at a moment where Europe and the European institutions are desperate to show unity, but the divisions on show here suggest that I think Europe as a whole is really going to struggle to come up with a coherent single position on a lot of the challenges that a Donald Trump presidency throws up.
Let's talk about some of those challenges here in the UK, Sam, because it's not just Westminster that was digesting the result yesterday, but British business as well. And we had some of our trade reporters talking to UK exporters yesterday about what the prospect of a second Trump presidency is going to mean for them, because Donald Trump has talked endlessly in his campaign about how important he thinks tariffs are. He's a fan of protectionism, as we know. He has made this pledge. As much as a Donald Trump pledge is worth anything, we don't know that he is going to put tariffs on everything being sold into America between 10 and 20%. That is going to change the global economy in an astronomical way. And of course, the biggest impact here in the UK is likely to be on our major export industries, goods exports, that is, to the USA. There are very specialist and high value sectors like car manufacturers, aerospace, pharmaceutical producers. These are industries worth collectively tens of billions of pounds to the UK economy, and they are all now facing up to a reality where there are going to be potentially big tariffs on their sales into America, and then we get the prospect of retaliatory tariffs that potentially leads to higher inflation in the UK. The economic repercussions are massive, and speaking to business leaders yesterday, they're really only just starting to digest this as a potential new reality. What it all means for Labour's promise to deliver growth is the other big question. And Rachel Reeves is on such a fine sort of high wire act already with the budget she delivered that really needs the UK to start growing if she's going to be able to deliver further public service investment in the latter half of the Parliament, which is essential, I think, if Labour are going to have any prospect of coming into the next election in a positive light. That suddenly all looks much more trepidatious in a world of tariffs and protectionism and all the repercussions of that.
Goldman Sachs cut UK GDP estimate next year from 1.6 to 1.4%, which just straight out the blocks was an inconvenience. Rachel Reeves was challenged about that when she appeared before the Treasury Select Committee for the first time yesterday and said it was too early to refine her own forecast, but that is going to be a worry. The other impact of tariffs will be the thing that sort of helped really undermine Kamala Harris on the campaign trail, which is inflation. That's the thing that economists are worried a consequence of Trump's protectionist trade policies, and could also be a consequence if things get more hairy in the Middle East, if the oil price starts to rise again. Rachel Reeves, in her budget, left herself very little wiggle room because she borrowed so much against her own fiscal rules, her own limits on how much she could borrow. And so global instability, higher inflation, lower growth is a cocktail that she will undoubtedly struggle with. we're just going to have to see how Britain adjusts its economic policy to cope with this. She wouldn't be drawn on whether or not Britain would impose retaliatory tariffs back. It seems like Europe would do that, but would we kind of duck that challenge or go with Europe? It feels a bit too early to say. But Britain's sort of caught in the middle of a potential trade war.
And I think what we've learned over the past 48 hours, but really over the past couple of years, is that the political toxicity of soaring inflation is enormous. The impact that this has on voters and the way that it's prepared to make the way it makes them feeling about incumbent governments is huge. And so, were Labour to be in charge over another big inflation spike in the latter half of this Parliament, you would have to fear for their political prospects, no matter how big Keir Starmer's majority might be. I mean, that is one of the big takeaways of this American election, because from the outside you look at the American economy and go, that's a struggling economy, looks all right where we're sitting, pal, but not for many millions of American workers and small business owners who've really struggled with rising prices, and they made their feelings clear with either staying at home on Tuesday's election or voting for the alternate candidate, no matter how much they didn't actually like him very much. And I think that is something that Keir Starmer will be taking away and no doubt worrying about, given the uncertainty around the British economy.
And the main way that you tackle inflation, well, that's interest rates. And at midday today, we've got an interest rate decision from the Bank of England. Most economists still think that there will be a reduction in interest rates decided by the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee. But the size of the budget last week and now the Donald Trump election will just give them a bit of extra things, a bit of pause for thought, some extra things to talk about around that table, because the path for inflation isn't quite as obviously downward as it was even a week ago. We've also got, I think, interest rates from the Fed coming later today.
Shall we just talk very briefly about the impact on domestic politics as well, Sam? What did you make of this? We talked yesterday morning about how the past comments of David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, were now going to come back and haunt him, and how certainly I think his future looks very, very uncertain, no matter what he or anyone else might say. Downing Street came out in the briefing after PMQs yesterday and were asked, will David Lammy stay on for the whole Parliament? And they said yes. Yes, committing apparently to a cabinet minister's future for the entire 5 years of the Parliament. Really? Have you ever heard of Downing Street doing that before? And is that remotely credible that when they say that he's actually going to be Foreign Secretary for the next 5 years? I mean, maybe he will, but I'm afraid I don't believe a word of it. What do you think?
I always thought it was a slip of the tongue. No spokesman can ever guarantee a cabinet minister in post. What if they do something incredibly stupid?
Heaven forbid. Heaven forbid David Lammy would ever do that.
But I think this goes to the heart of the difficult political dilemma for Keir Starmer, because, and Kemi Badenoch actually in her first set of Prime Minister's questions, sort of jousting, kind of could clearly work this out. Keir Starmer's job is to repair the damage of the past that he and Lammy did by their disobliging remarks, right? But every time he does that, it creates a wedge with his own side, because Labour folk are deeply, deeply uncomfortable with Donald Trump being in the White House and just will rankle every time they hear Keir Starmer try to heap praise on the US president, however pragmatic they know it is. I was most struck by Emily Thornberry. Now, she does matter. She's the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. The White House the future White House will know that she's a Labour politician. And she was asked whether she stood by her past criticism of Trump as a racist sexual predator. And she replied, well, he is. But he is the president of the United States and we need to work with him. And she said that Trump's victory was disappointing. So you have Labour voices that are still gunning for Trump. He will hear that. Other members of the Labour Party will be deeply uncomfortable the closer that Starmer tries to get to Trump. This is a good wedge for the Tories to mine. And that's why Kemi Badenoch was goading Starmer, asking him, are you going to invite Trump to address Parliament? Because so many Labour MPs had signed motions suggesting he should be nowhere near the place. That kind of division within the Labour Party is something I think that could cause Starmer some headaches.
All right, plenty of headaches for Keir Starmer today. Plenty there'll be next week when we return to your airwaves. We're out of time today, but Sam, I'll very much look forward to seeing you next Monday morning. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
And you, what a week. Time to relax, but we'll see you on Monday.